Japanese gardens.
The snow-clad slopes of Mount Fuji are one of the stunning images of Japan that we all recognize. But despite a fascination for the country and its culture, there remains something mysterious and intriguing. Full of Japanese plants like cherries and maples and hostas. Few of us really understand or know them. They remain an enigma. So I have set out to try and get to the heart of the culture that lies behind some of the most beautiful gardens in the world. I shall be visiting Japan during its two most radiant seasons, spring and autumn. I'll follow the development of stroll gardens, experience the serenity of a tea garden, and learn the secrets of creating a Zen landscape.
And the stone said to me, it's okay. This angle, this position.
The stone is talking to you.
Yes.
I'm setting out to relish, contemplate, and hopefully learn to understand these iconic gardens of Japan. I'm starting this trip, as I did my first one in spring, by coming here to Kenroku-en. And that's because back in April, the head gardener, Mr. Shishime, said you really must come back and see what the garden looks like in autumn. So here I am. And glowing in the autumn sunshine, it looks pretty good. Kenroku-en was originally created as a private garden attached to Kanazawa Castle, and is one of the most celebrated in Japan. Keeping it looking as good as this is a big job. I saw just how labor-intensive that work was when I was here in spring, and 6 months later, it's clear that the pace hasn't let up. The women are still hand-weeding the moss to remove any single blades of grass, although now accompanied by burning coils of repellent to keep the mosquitoes at bay. The cherry is undoubtedly the national tree in spring, and the celebrations for its blossom are huge. But there are also great celebrations in autumn for the colouring of the leaves, particularly of maples. Now, Japan has many different kinds of maples, and they all have these glorious hues of yellow, orange, and red. And there's a real festive air. The weather is glorious, people are out and about, all due to the falling of the autumn leaves. And being Japan, there is a specific term for this festivity, which literally translates as red leaf hunting. This couple have come to Kenroku-en to pose for their wedding photos. They aren't actually getting married till next spring, but they're starting early, whilst the garden still provides the perfect backdrop. They're standing in front of the same pines that I watched being pruned last spring. I now want to see the process of yukitsuri, where the trees are strung with ropes so that they look like giant maypoles. Hello, how nice to see you. This looks wonderful. I'm so glad I've seen it. It's good to meet up again with Mr. Shishime, the head gardener. And he explains that these rope structures are there to protect the trees from snow damage. He takes me off to show me how it's done. Vertical bamboo poles are lashed to the trunk, and then dozens of rice straw ropes are carefully lowered from the top to be tied to the branches, which prevents them from bending and even breaking under the weight of the snow. The gardening team make this complicated and precise process look deceptively easy.
やってみるこれ。
Yes, of course. I'd love to. I would absolutely love to. I realise that the invitation is a rare honour that I can't possibly refuse, but it is a little daunting. Okay, you show me the correct way to do it.
これが枝で、
Yeah?
これが縄。で、はい、こう来て。
Oh, very simple. Very simple. I'll do it. I'm very honoured. I'm fatter than you. God, blimey.
全然
There we are, that's better. They're very beautiful. I have to say that wearing proper Japanese secateurs is probably the summit of my life's ambitions and dreams. So I'm just going to savour this moment for 1 second. Right, now I'm ready to go. Okay, let's come on up. Just going up a little bit higher. If I fall, won't matter terribly. Here we go. So, actually no, hang on a minute. It wants to go that way through. It all looks so simple on the ground, and yet now I've completely forgotten how to tie the knot. So we tie here,
はいはい。
and then like that. That right?
うん。そうそうそう。
Now cut, yes, of course. Okay. That's my contribution to the garden for this year. There is an intensive 1-month period of yukitsuri at Kenroku-en, and that can take up to 500 gardeners tying up over 800 trees. The ropes then remain until March, when the snow begins to melt. When I was here in spring, I wasn't quite sure how to react to all the struts and supports that you inevitably see in a Japanese garden, some of them really quite dominant on the larger trees. But watching the strings being tied on, I suddenly got it. What I realize is it's all part of the same performance. In other words, the strings holding up the branches are as significant and as important to the garden as the branches themselves. And the Japanese enjoy and celebrate it all equally. Right across Japan, millions of people make a special outing to their favorite viewing spots during the red leaf hunting autumn season. And although it's a weekday in November, Kenroku-en is crowded with people enjoying the beauty of the magnificent display. It's been an absolute joy to come back to Kenroku-en and see it in its autumn clothes. But it is time to move on. So the next stop is Kyoto. When I first visited Kyoto back in spring, I traced some of the history of Japanese gardens. 8th century boating gardens, through the use of moss in Buddhist temples, to a 12th century tea garden, and the 15th century Zen gardens. And I'm now back to pick up that story at the start of the 17th century during the Edo period. This is Nijo Castle. Although Japanese castles were built as military strongholds, by the 17th century it was a period of sustained peace, and their gardens were becoming a major feature. This one at Nijo Castle was made in 1603 for the shogun, who was the political and military leader of Japan. The garden, set amongst the huge halls and defensive walls, was all part of the display of his power, wealth, and sophistication. And then in 1626, the emperor came to visit. So the whole place was revamped, the castle was made larger, and the garden was also rebuilt. This was a major reconstruction just for this one visit. A new palace was built on the southern side of the enlarged pond, creating a new viewpoint to admire the remodeled rocks and water. The palace, built specially for the emperor, has long since disappeared, but the footprint remains of a corridor that ran down here, and this was a foundation stone, and then there was a little pavilion going out over the water. The whole layout of the garden was altered to look its best viewed from this point. So when he sat here, he would be duly impressed by its beauty and grandeur. The pond features 3 islands. The island of the Immortals, to entice the gods to Nijo, flanked by 2 smaller ones, Crane Island and Turtle Island, both of which represent longevity. Over and above the history, I find the mechanics of a garden like this so extraordinary, because all these stones are placed with exquisite precision, and yet they're colossal. I mean, look at this bridge. It's an enormous lump of rock. And I have no idea how on earth they managed it. This garden has an austerity that doesn't alter with the seasons. But just as at Kenroku, the grounds here are filled with visitors enjoying the maples in their seasonal glory. People of all ages are strolling happily in the sun. And like me, exploring the market stalls that sell a wide range of suitably autumnal fare. And although it was only available once upon a time to a privileged few, any visitor can now enjoy a traditional tea ceremony within the historic walls of the castle and its garden. I'm setting off again now because I want to visit some stroll gardens, which are one of the most enduring forms of all the Japanese garden styles. There are different kinds and forms of stroll garden from different historical periods, and to visit the first means crossing the country to the capital, Tokyo. The garden of Rikugien is a fine example of a classic stroll garden. Set in the middle of this crowded, chaotic city, it's an oasis of calm and beautiful serenity. Stroll gardens were a new style of garden design that evolved in the 17th century. And whereas rock gardens were completely static, and tea gardens just had a simple path to the tea house, the whole essence of a stroll garden was that you moved around it, around these curving paths, along a series of viewpoints to admire vistas that you wouldn't otherwise see. And they were created for a new class, really. These were the samurai that had evolved from being the warriors of an earlier period to a moneyed elite. And they made these gardens as an expression of privilege and power. The garden was completed in 1702 by a samurai lord, and it remained in private hands until 1938, when it was donated to the Tokyo city government, who turned it into a public park. So whereas for centuries only a tiny handful of the elite had access to it, Rikugien can now be enjoyed by everyone. The garden has evolved to a certain extent, but the function has not changed at all. The garden's name, Rikugien, refers to the 6 principles of poetry, originating from ancient China, and the layout of the garden is based on a collection of poems describing the scenery of Wakayama Bay in southern Japan. The guide, Eriko Yokohama, explained it to me.
The founder of this garden tried to reproduce the 88 points of beautiful scenery in the garden. And they put the stone markers, 88 stone markers in each place.
So these are the little stone pillars that you see?
Yes.
So the idea is you walk around and stand at each and then look out and there is a scene?
Yes.
Now, I see the garden is beginning to be prepared for winter, but I don't know what these straw mats, very beautiful,
Yes.
around the pine trees. Could you tell me about them?
The bad insect go into the straw mat
Yes.
and then try to keep warm during the winter time. They cannot go down because the lower part is tied very tightly. So in March, they take out the straw mat and burn it. So that's a very ecological way of destroying the bad insect.
In Japan, even pest control is made into a refined and traditional form of decoration. Each bend reveals a dramatic vista, and to have such a superb garden open to all in the heart of one of the busiest cities in the world is a great luxury. I'm now going to pick up the story of these gardens at the beginning of the 20th century. As we discovered in the last program, that's when, as a result of a great Japanese exhibition in 1910, the British became fascinated by all things Japanese, and there was even a brief fashion for making Japanese gardens back home. But there is a garden not far from Rikugien, which shows the other side of that coin. You would be forgiven for thinking that here was another typically Japanese garden. There are maples, stone lanterns, cloud pruning, the familiar repertoire. But walk up the steps to the next level, and you are greeted with a view that is anything but typical. This is not what you would expect to see in the middle of Tokyo. It's an English garden made by a man called Josiah Konda in 1917. He was born in Surrey, and Konda had come to Japan to be a professor, and he's regarded really as the father of modern Western Japanese architecture. And as a result, is a revered figure here in Japan. This is his enduring contribution. And what's fascinating about it is that it is not just a slice of the West, it's the slice of the West 100 years ago. At the very same time that Japanese gardens were being introduced to Britain, Konda was making a very English garden here at Kew Furukawa. It's strange for me to see roses blooming in the middle of November, but because of the hot, wet Tokyo summers, they're pruned back hard after their first May flowering, and then have this second display in autumn. Amongst the 90 or so varieties are some very familiar names, including Queen Elizabeth, and there's New Dawn and Dorothy Perkins. There are an unusual proportion of hybrid teas, which are a cross between China and shrub roses. But of course, these were immensely popular in the early 20th century when this garden was made. This is probably one of the most famous roses ever grown. It's called Peace, and I like the story behind it, particularly in an English garden here in Japan. It was developed in France just before the Second World War, but there was no time to trademark the name or even think of it. And so cuttings were sent all around the world as the Germans were invading France. These cuttings were grown on by different people and all given different names. But after the war, the French grower contacted the British Field Marshal, Alan Brooke, and said, could it be called after him? And he said, no, it would be much better if the rose was known by the name of Peace. So that's what it was called wherever it had been grown, and immediately was successful. Hundreds of millions of this rose have been sold and grown all over the world, and it continues to be one of the very best hybrid teas ever developed. The colour that these roses bring to the garden is exceptional here in Japan, and this clearly delights the many visitors. I'm hoping that the director of the garden, Atsuko Hanafusa, can explain that fascination.
There are lots of visitors here. Do you think that people see these flowers as exotic? Because, of course, for us in Britain, they're very normal.
すごくレアな感じで、とっても印象的っていうふうに、それを皆さん喜んでいらしてくださいます。
If people like the roses so much, why do we not see more roses, or indeed flowers, in Japanese gardens?
日本庭園は基本的にはその華やかな感じっていうのを好みません。もうちょっとこう落ち着いた感じの庭園なので、 移ろうような花をあまり入れないっていうのがもともとのスタイルです。ですからここは上の方がこうローズガーデンがたくさんあって、下に行くと日本庭園になって、その違いがすごくこう特徴的な庭なんですね。
Konda's very British, very Edwardian garden reflects a period when Japan was rapidly westernizing. But it remains an exotic oddity here in the middle of Tokyo. And for me, it's been a surprising treat to see such a big collection of superb hybrid tea roses. They've become very unfashionable at home. But this garden, locked in a time warp on the other side of the world, shows that they can be exquisitely beautiful. Before I head to my next garden, I'm going to make a detour to a suburb north of Tokyo called Kawaguchi that's known for being a gardening hub. I'm visiting a garden center located at an intersection between two motorways. It's what is known as a roadside station or pit stop, which are government-designated rest areas found along major roads and highways all over Japan. Instead of the all-purpose service station, these pit stops promote tourism and trade by only selling specific local goods and produce.
Wherever I travel, I like to visit nurseries and garden centres, as well as the gardens of the great and the good, because as a gardener, it's just as informative to find out what real people are buying and planting in their gardens as admiring the finished product.
The thing that strikes me straight away about this place is the sheer size of it. It's bigger than anything I've seen in the UK, with a huge variety of plants and seeds.
I mean, it's actually a fascinating mix of plants. You would never see this in Europe.
And some of the prices are jaw-droppingly high. You wouldn't find such expensive plants in your average British garden centre.
Just £1,000. It's just amazing. Hello. What are you buying today? What are you looking for?
季節のものが出るんですよ、ここでたくさん。それでいいのがあれば私も購入して庭に植えてます。
And what do you like to grow? What's your favorite plants to grow in your garden?
季節のね、今でしたらパンジーとかビオラとか、いろんな色をですね、組み合わせてちょっと自分なりにアレンジして植えてます。
It's interesting that this lady is buying brightly coloured plants like violets and pansies that seem to me to be very Western, which is in stark contrast to the more subdued tones of the traditional Japanese gardens I've seen so far.
Hello. What are you buying here?
カンパニュラ。
Do you like these? Do you grow them at
そ
home?
うです、大好きです。もうそろそろ苗が出てるんじゃないかと思って今日こちらへ来てみました。
Do you garden a lot? Do you have a big garden?
そんなに広くないですけれども、いろいろ植えて楽しむのが好きで。今バラが綺麗に咲いてます。
Coming here has been a fascinating lesson in what private gardening is like in Japan, because it seems that people are selecting things that are much more ephemeral and colourful than the received idea of what a Japanese garden looks like. I'm continuing my education by heading back to the garden capital of Japan, Kyoto. And I'm now going to follow the development of the straw garden from the 17th century and visit one that was made at the end of the 19th century and that is starting to absorb Western changes. Murinan is a Meiji-era straw garden, and its purpose was not only to show off the wealth and power of the owner, but also to provide entertainment for important guests. So this garden, like all stroll gardens of every period, is designed to have a series of changing views as you follow a path that weaves through water and rocks, trees and shrubs, and often incorporates borrowed landscapes. And although the garden is actually little more than an acre, with clever design that both reveals distant wooded hills and hides the surrounding city, it seems much larger. The garden was completed in 1898 and was designed by one of the leading garden designers of the period, Ogawa Jihei, and the home of one of Japan's most powerful leaders, the future Prime Minister, General Yamagata Aritomo. Murinan shows some of the growing Western influence by successfully combining many traditional Japanese features with the tightly mown lawns of an English country garden.
I think anybody who's gardened in the West takes grass for granted, but you can't do that in Japan. To see grass on this scale is really unusual. It's West. Grass and moss flow equally into each other. And if ever there was a symbol for Western influence and Japanese culture, it's the way that those two work together.
General Yamagata was a garden designer in his own right and had close involvement with the creation of Murinan. He specified the exact location of the waterfall in the far corner of the garden, close to both the road and the nearby Lake Biwa Canal. And the canal had been built in the 1880s to help reinvigorate industry in Kyoto. And it was Yamagata himself who had signed off the permission for its construction.
And perhaps that's why he felt that he could simply siphon off water from it into the garden. And the pretense that he gave was that it was necessary for fire control. Well, the result is the garden now has this splendid stream running through it, opening out into a pond and creating movement and energy right through the middle. Mr. Yamagata made a tea house in the garden, and the emperor learnt of this and sent him a gift of 2 pine trees, which he planted. Now, because the emperor sent them, he looked after them with special attention.
The pines flourished, and as Yamagata wrote, they were like dragons rising through the clouds. He sent a photo of them to the emperor, who replied in the form of a short poem expressing his pleasure and the hope that the pine trees would keep Yamagata company for many years to come.
Now, they're no longer here, but the place is marked by these stone squares. In fact, there's another younger pine growing inside one of them. But they're all part of the history of the garden.
The use of the borrowed landscape of the distant wooded hills expands the sense of space. The gardeners maintain this illusion by pruning the surrounding barrier of trees to just the right height so that they frame the mountains whilst hiding the invading city skyline.
2 things strike me most about this. The first is that the trees are actually much smaller than they look from a distance, and that's because the garden uses really clever perspective. But more importantly, is because they are pruning it, you see the borrowed landscape. So the hillside in the far distance becomes part of the garden, and that makes the garden seem much bigger. And that feature of the borrowed landscape is a really important part of the next garden I'm going to see.
This is Tairu Sanso, another turn-of-the-century stroll garden not far from Murinan. I had expected that the garden would be best appreciated by following the paths, but was told that the most spectacular views were from inside the building. So I put on the clean white socks I'd been instructed to bring and gingerly stepped into this immaculate house. It was good advice, because the garden does look superb from here. At this time of year, when you get that rosy spread from the maples and the cherries as the autumn colour begins to hit it, it really does feel as good as any painting. And someone said to me that the European aristocracy collected paintings for their houses, whereas the wealthy Japanese made living art out of their gardens. And just like any good work of art, there are no irrelevant or chance details. So the boat in the foreground perfectly plays with perspective. And the waterfall and the watermill are all composed as carefully as a painting. If you wanted to hire someone to create your garden as a living work of art, then you needed the best designer. And Jihei Ogawa was the man of the moment. He had designed Murinan 10 years earlier. So he was hired here to do the same sort of thing, which is to create a landscape that feels grand and dramatic, packed with these extraordinary tableaus and views, and yet in the middle of Kyoto, in a relatively small space. This garden, believe it or not, is only just over half the size of my own garden at home. Yet it seems huge, with all water running everywhere, trees rising up the hillside. The scale is enormous, even though the space is very limited. I'm hearing two waterfalls. This spot right now, we pass from one waterfall to the other, but I can only see one. So when I'm back there, I'm assuming that the sound comes from the water that I can see. But in fact, there's another one. And the garden is full of those sleights of hand. So when you're sitting on the balcony, looking out on this tableau, this beautiful scene, the sound accompaniment is working perfectly, but from a completely different source. Taru Sanso is one of the few privately owned historic gardens in Kyoto. It is immaculately maintained and exemplifies the almost obsessional artistry and detail behind Japanese gardens. Stroll gardens remain as popular today in Japan as they were in the Edo period. And there are lots to see in Kyoto. But there is one modern one in particular that I want to visit while I'm here. In the first program, I went to see a garden designed by Mirei Shigemori. And he had taken a traditional idea and given it a real modern twist. And this temple on the outskirts of Kyoto, I'm told that he has done the same thing with the stroll garden. This is Matsuo Taisha, which is one of Kyoto's oldest shrines. Its origins can be traced back to 700 AD. The story is that a nobleman on horseback came across a turtle bathing under a waterfall. This was a profoundly auspicious sign because turtles are considered symbols of longevity and wisdom. So he founded the shrine on the spot. In 1973, a new series of buildings were completed, and Mirei Shigemori was commissioned to make gardens to accompany them. Shigemori based this garden upon the ancient Chinese legend of this winding stream, and cups of sake would be put into the water so it would work its way downstream to reach poets, to give them inspiration to write suitable verses for their masters. And what's really unusual is actually the water itself, because Shigemori hardly ever liked to use actual water, tending to use gravel or sand to represent it instead. I really like the way that Shigemori manages to convey the idea of a large landscape in what is really quite a small space. It captures the essence of a whole hillside and the stream running through it. Tomotaka has been a priest here for over 15 years, so he can tell me how this garden has evolved. I gather that you saw this garden very early on. What did it look like then?
できた時はコンクリートは当然真っ白、そして石も磨かれておりましたので、ちょうど夏にこちらのお庭見学に来たんですけど、あまりの眩しさにね、こうちょっともうしばらく目がこう痛いぐらい本当に眩しいお庭でしたですね。ですからこれが本当に日本庭園なんだろうかとちょっとその時思ったのは覚えております。
So why do you think that has changed? What has made those stones mellow?
どうしてもこの辺りは湿気が多いですので、そういう意味で言えば苔も生えやすいですし、本当は苔が生えれば取ってほしいというお弟子さんもおられるんですけど、ただ我々としてみればやはり日本庭園的な雰囲気を出すためには、そういう苔であったり何であったりというのをなるべく取らないように、こうなるべく古びた感じが出るようにという感じで維持はしております。
So a new garden sooner or later becomes an old garden. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Shigemori died shortly after this garden was made, and it was left to his son to realize his designs for the rest of the shrine. Shigemori was a master of taking traditional styles and combining them with modern conceptual ideas to create his gardens. However, the priest Tomotaka told me that some feel that this can't be considered a proper Japanese garden and that it is more akin to modern art. Well, there are those, like myself, who consider that not to be criticism, but high praise. "38 million people live in Greater Tokyo, and the city is set to have the world's highest population density by 2030. So it's not surprising that a garden of any kind is a luxury that many don't have. However, the Japanese have other ways to bring a little greenery into their lives. One method is to shrink everything down to a smaller scale.
It doesn't matter what style or age of garden you find here in Japan, the trees and shrubs are invariably tightly pruned and controlled, but none more so than bonsai. And bonsai, I think, is something that everybody associates with Japan. And I've come to a suburb of Tokyo, which is improbably called Bonsai Village, to meet a bonsai master.
The word bonsai simply means planted in a shallow container. It originally came from China, arriving in Japan at the start of the 14th century. There are different regional styles. Tokyo encourages stubbier trees, whereas those in Kyoto focus more on elegance. But every specimen starts out as an ordinary plant, and it's only skillful pruning and careful training that eventually turns it into a miniature representation of a fully grown tree, some of which can be hundreds of years old. This is the bonsai nursery Fuyoen, run by Hiroshi Takayama, a world-renowned bonsai master, and he's agreed to give me a lesson on the essence of bonsai pruning.
Hello. Now, I'd be very interested to show me what you're doing.
はい。ここにこれだけ伸びてるんですね。この一番元の葉からでここでこれもちょっと出っ張ってますからで揃えてるわけです。
So nice shape.
はい。後で一つやってみますか？
Yes.
So there's your last cut there. Yes.
So we cut
Yes,
out
yes.
this,
はい。はい、そうです。
I just cut there, yeah?
はい、yes, yes.
Oh,
はいはい、そうですね。
that's grown a lot. That's got very dense, isn't it?
はいはい。はい、これでいいですね。で、最終的には盆栽の樹形というのは三角形になるように作るのが、はい、
Smooth triangular shape.
はい。ですから、これが正面ですね。で、これ脇側面から見てもなんとなくこういうふうになってるように。で、もちろん後ろからこれ裏ですから見てもこういうふうに。は
So
い
you have this shape
いや
here.
はいはいそうです。それが基本決まりです。
Thank you very much. It's always good to have a lesson from a master, although I appreciate that was very elementary. And I also appreciate that bonsai is an ancient tradition that is very popular today because it's small, but it's not modern. And that's what I want to go and see now, is modern gardening for a modern world. I've come here for a lesson in kokedama that translates as moss balls. Now, here. Kokedama is becoming increasingly popular and is a simple way of bringing a piece of living garden into the smallest home. Chie Kishimoto runs workshops on modern kokedama and has kindly agreed to give me a crash course. Well, I think that is very beautiful, so I'd love to learn how to make something like that. Could you show me?
はい。で、このハイゴケをですね、ちっちゃい苔玉なので。
Turn that over.
OK。
Right.
はい。
So just take this and wrap it round. Just right round the whole thing. So it's got a nice little blanket. Now what is this?
これ竹炭。炭は有効な微生物を住まわせることができて植物が健康に育つんですね。なのでちょっと竹炭を塩コショウみたいにちょこっと入れてあげるだけで苔玉が育ちやすくなります。そうしたら
Okay, so now we wrap it
ボー
up.
ルになるように
Now, if you saw me wrap my Christmas
外に
presents,
こう出す。
you would realize that this is going to end
で
badly. Okay.
よく丸くなるように
Well, I will do my best.
木綿の糸で巻きつけます。
And why does it have to be cotton?
苔が密着した時に溶けてなくなってくれるんですね。化繊の糸だとずっと残っちゃうので。
So that
ぐる
goes
ぐ
on.
るっといろんなところを取って
I'm going to have to put my
曲げてください
glasses on for this because I can't really see it. Ah,
そしたらぐるぐるっといろんなところ回してください。はい。で気をつけてやらないとナスみたいにこう縦長になっちゃうんですね。丸く。
so it's a tomato rather than an aubergine, even though it's the same plant. Oh, come on, this is not too bad. This could be worse.
丸い丸い。
Oh, so we cut that.
切ったら
Yeah?
これをお箸でツンって入れちゃう中にグッて。
Gosh, that's very clever. Clever but difficult. There we are.
OK です。
But then,
はい。丸くなったかしら。
well,
Come
I
on.
give. It's a sad comparison, but okay.
できました。すごい。
Well, I think it's very beautiful, and I love the delicacy of it. Thank you. Thank you very much for showing me how to do that. Kokedama are fun, as well as being a way of bringing a touch of nature into the home, which is clearly a good thing. However, on a larger scale, the opportunities to create new public gardens in Tokyo are few and far between. But the government has recognized their importance and is starting to do something about that. For all the huge buildings and numbers of people in Tokyo, there is a concerted effort to green the city. In fact, there is now a law that every building that is either new or refurbished over 3,000 square meters must have 20% of its exterior surface, including the roof, that is green. As a result, there are many new roof gardens across the city, like this one, up on top of a shopping centre, with a bullet train running just a few feet away. And although it is an eclectic mix of Mediterranean and Japanese plants, it is nevertheless a green space. And the result is that this overpopulated, frenetic, extraordinarily busy city is becoming more pleasant for people to live in and environmentally much more friendly. Another unlikely place to find a garden is in one of the world's busiest airports. Right in the middle of the domestic departure lounge of Tokyo's main airport, Haneda, is a permanent growing oasis. It's a garden made by a man who will be familiar to millions of people in the UK because it's designed by Mr. Ishihara, who has shown at Chelsea Flower Show for 14 years and in the process collected no less than 10 gold medals. In fact, this garden is based upon one that he showed at the 2011 Chelsea Flower Show and was opened here after the earthquake of the same year as a statement of the enduring strength and beauty of Japan. And a garden in the middle of a busy airport somehow makes sense here because the Japanese have clearly learnt to utilize all the space that they can to create little islands of calm. Mr. Ishihara, hello.
Nice to meet you.
And you, how are you?
How are
Very
you?
nice to see you. And to see this garden.
Thank you. Then inside.
I'd love to see
はい
inside it. Yes, please.
本当はこれ使いたい植物はこれじゃなかったんだけど、本来は全部これ今の植物が桜だったりモミジだったりイメージしてほしいと。だけどこの環境なんでこの違う植物を使ってる。
Because it's interesting, this garden doesn't appear very Japanese when you first see it. And what have been the problems of maintaining a garden here? Because a show garden for Chelsea is there for 1 week. This has now been here for nearly 7 years. How easy has that been?
すごい難しかった。やはり夜にしないといけない。だから深夜作業になります。はい。
Really? So a difficult environment to make a garden. Well, I look forward to seeing you at Chelsea. Again, I hope you will be coming back next year.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
This is clearly a very tricky place to make a garden, but it works. It softens what would otherwise be a hard and impersonal space. And this greening process is not just working in public areas. I've heard of a private house recently designed and built that has incorporated the concept into every aspect of its fabric. And that's what I want to go and see next. This building is known as the Treenis House. The owner, Taki Ishii, pulled down his original house on the site so he could replace it with this remarkable building. It took 8 years to build, finally being completed in 2017. And from the outset, the architect, Akihisa Hirata, wanted to integrate nature and man-made structure. As a result, the garden has been incorporated into the very fabric of the building. As you wind up the outside of the house, it is a bit like clambering through the branches of a tree, and of course the planting aids that sensation. There's also a real sense of the external wall being removed. So these stairs, which would normally be on the inside of the house, suddenly appear and take you outside the building. And of course, that's the point. It's playing with this idea of the inside and the outside and the garden, which is normally on a horizontal plane, rising up and coming along with you on this adventure. This garden seems to me to be a potential model for future urban gardens. And I asked Takaishi what it's like to live in.
Now, was this your idea to create this combination of garden and house in this style?
No, actually, that was the architect's idea.
Right.
But I told him that I'm an art dealer, so always in the white cube all the time. So I don't want to be in the white cube when I'm in the home.
It's a house full of levels and shapes and forms. It feels organic. It feels like the house has grown.
Yes, it is. It's like a tree, kind of.
Yes.
In the forest, I'm kind of lost where I am first. It's a maze, actually, first, but it's very fun.
Well, it's really almost as much a garden as it is a house.
Yeah, yeah. I spend whole seasons here, so you can realize the new things each season.
Yes.
Yeah, it's very refreshing.
One of the things that I can't help notice with a Western eye is the relationship between a sort of very beautiful and proportioned house like this and other buildings and the amazing tangle of wires you have. Is that something that you think that people would like to change or that nobody notices?
You live in here, you don't notice that much, actually. But I kind of like it. That's Tokyo, actually,
Yes.
downtown Tokyo, I think.
Okay, so that's just the spirit of the place.
Yeah, I think so.
There's a strong vein of tradition at the core of this building. Everywhere in Japan, you see the importance of making nature a part of one's life, whether that be in the historic stroll gardens of Kyoto or within the walls of an ultra-modern Tokyo house. There has been so much to take in on this journey that it is a little overwhelming. So now I want to get away from the bustle of Tokyo to see one last garden in a tranquil setting. I've come right across the country to the west coast by the Sea of Japan. It's been a long journey, but it's worth it because I've been told about a garden here that I must visit, which includes components from all the many gardens that I've visited throughout this series. This is the Adachi Museum at Yasugi and has been voted the most beautiful garden in Japan. There are elements in it of every Japanese garden style, from Zen dry gardens, moss gardens, and stroll gardens, to borrowed landscape, and of course, the obligatory maples. The guiding spirit behind this was Zenko Adachi, who was a farmer's son born and raised in a nearby village. He created the museum to house his art collection and made its surrounding garden to provide the perfect setting. Zenko Adachi learned his business acumen very early. As a small boy, he sold charcoal, and he only had straw sandals to wear, and often he'd have to trudge through snow and walk 10 miles every morning. And he worked out that if he doubled the amount of charcoal on his barrow, he could make a lot more money. And that sense of entrepreneurship very quickly earned him a large fortune. Throughout his life, he traveled across Japan, visiting gardens and personally selecting trees and stones to use here. To the end of his days, he apparently knew every detail of every single tree and rock in the garden. This was his obsession and his masterpiece. But like all masterpieces, you can look, but you can't touch. The garden can only be viewed from these large windows inside the building. And that means that the design and the maintenance and every detail of it is geared towards that one face. And the garden is a series of static scenes to be looked at like paintings. Everything is meticulously thought out and maintained like a vast Chelsea show garden. And every clipped shrub, rock, and sweeping curve of grass is calculated for maximum effect. To help unravel this virtuoso performance, I'm catching up again with Professor Suzuki, who I first met back at Kenroku-en in April. Professor Suzuki, could you explain really the philosophy behind the garden?
The Adachi Museum Garden, it was kind of the miniaturized landscape, the landscape of the seaside with pine trees and white sand and ocean. For us, it's kind of the typical landscape of Japan, very, very popular, very calm, and it's a mother landscape, I think. And it's a kind of our mindscape.
As well as being a mindscape, I like the idea of that, and a distillation. What is most noticeable to me is that the whole garden is designed to be seen from these windows.
Yeah.
I mean, even us sitting here looking out over the pond garden.
Yeah.
It's a series of pictures, isn't it?
Yes, it is, yes. He was inspired by the paintings. Like a Western painting, it's the framing and also the one piece and one piece, one piece. And also in Japan, traditional way to paint the rolling.
So a scroll, yes.
Yeah.
So you should see the garden as a scroll that you move along.
Right, exactly.
Like
yes, it's kind of unique scenery, like a sequence with the idea of scrolling pictures here.
I was struck by something Professor Suzuki said, which was that Adachi, with all its references to traditional Japanese gardens, for the first time for a long while, is inspiring a generation of Japanese to look at their own history for inspiration to create new and beautiful gardens. Well, I've come to the end of my time here in Japan. And I've been so lucky. I've seen the cherry blossom at its very best in spring. And now in autumn, gardens just raging with a fiery glory. And I've seen a whole range of gardens too, from the very earliest pond gardens right through the rock gardens of the Zen period, tea gardens, stroll gardens, up to the most modern. And I've really started to understand and learn about the handling of space, how that the gaps between things can be as important as any other aspect of the garden. And the Japanese regard every detail to be important and therefore worthy of being beautiful. Modern Japan still has a real awareness of its history, and there is still a reverence for nature, and I believe a living delight in its gardens.
Gardener's World is back in a couple of weeks. That's Friday the 8th of March at 8:30. The hit musical that won 6 Oscars, La La Land, is coming tomorrow night at 9 here on BBC Two. Next tonight, it's QI.
Are you here to pick a Prime Minister or deal with your son?
Intercepted data, hacked voicemail. We go for the top.
Your son's brain suffered significant damage.
He'll still be our son.
What does that even mean?
He's a threat, Max.
Caden, what have you done? Mother, Father, Son starts Wednesday the 6th of March on BBC Two.
Most people would go from A to B on a plane, but then they'd miss all this.
5 pairs of ordinary Brits are travelling 12,000 miles.
What am I doing?
Without taking a single flight.
Holy moly, that's going to be tough.
But who will have the skill?
This is where you get to find out about yourself.
And the charm.
I want to help you.
To conquer the journey.
That's it, let's go.
Race across the world. Starts Sunday.